And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining in to the Thurston County Board of County Commissioners work session on Thurston Strong and United Way's CRF funding proposals. And we have, by way of introduction, I'm John Hutchings, the chair of the board. And we have Vice Chair Ty Menser, looks like I see him moving in the background. We have Commissioner Gary Edwards, County Manager Romero Chavez, Assistant County Manager Robin Campbell, and Robin, will you or Romero introduce everybody else that I may or may not be seeing?
I see Chris Wells with the Darth Vader picture, maybe appropriate for the times. And I see Mindy, but I think you introduced Mindy already, right? Mindy Rule.
Well, I just said hi. I did not introduce her.
Okay.
And Jenica.
Jenica Machado.
Michael Cade.
And Robin Campbell.
And Jason. Okay. So go ahead, Romero, and kick this off, please.
So thank you, commissioners. So let me give you the background leading to this presentation, and maybe at the end of this presentation, I can, just for the benefit of the group, I can probably outline the next steps. So at least there is an understanding of what is coming next. This is related to the CRF, that's the coronavirus funding, also known as the Treasury CARES funding. The county was allocated $15.7 million. And it was, it has some parameters in which how the county can spend that money. And one of the key elements is needs to be spent by October 30th, 2020. And it has to be specifically related to the COVID-19 emergency. I engaged the board here maybe 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, in terms of a process as to how you may consider how you go about in distributing the $15.7 million. Leading to that conversation, you receive a request from Thurston Strong requesting $70,000 from the county to support their efforts. You discussed that option, and the board was supportive of accommodating that request from Thurston Strong of $70,000. And the question was whether at that time we use CDBG money, the Community Development Grant Program, or perhaps the upcoming at that time, the CARES funding. So the board's decision was to wait until the CARES funding become available because it provides a little more flexibility as to how the funding can be utilized as opposed to CDBG money, which is a lot of strings attached. So when I engaged the board, I provided a proposal, and the board agreed on how this money could be distributed. First of all, the board, and this is an initial decision, okay? This is not a final decision because the board was very clear in determining how this is just preliminary decisions in terms of the distribution of the funds. The board determined that first of all, we need to ask for reimbursement for the past expenditures that we have incurred in terms of responding to the COVID-19 emergency. And as of today, that cost is $2.8 million. And we're going to be asked for reimbursement from the COVID-19 from Commerce related to those past expenditures. The next decision that you made is to set aside what you may recall that information to set aside for outside purposes. And I believe in general terms, the board wanted to have support to small business as well as support for social services. And you set aside $1 million to accommodate that effort. And that is why you have in here today Chris Well and Michael Cade in terms of those two outfits that perhaps meet the intent of the board. But also on the remainder funding, you also made initial recommendations that perhaps we need to continue to provide public health emergency response as we move along. And it was a presentation to you. It was close to $6.5 million related to public health. And that's how the pots of money were start distributing in the county, because the county does not have any other money to respond to the public health emergency, as you know. So what is left from that pot, you ask for all the offices and departments to submit applications. I sent an email requesting those applications, I believe, over a week ago. Those applications were due yesterday. We have an internal team that will be assessing all those applications. And that review team, which Jenica is part of that, she just disappeared from the screen. And as a result of the review of the team, the recommendations will bring to the board at a later conversation. So, you are going to be facing a lot of requests. You know, this is one of the requests that you will be receiving today. You will have a lot of requests from internal offices and departments, and as well as you have also to address the ongoing obligations that we have to respond to this emergency from the public health perspective. So that's the framework, the background in terms of as to why we got here. So Jenica has helped us to, you know, bring Michael and Chris, as well as Mindy, to give their perspective related to their proposal.
Very nice. So are you going to start, Michael or Chris, or how do you have this scripted?
I'll go ahead and start if you, you know, if you want to, yeah, definitely have a. Yep, I'm ready to go.
We have until 2:00, and there's no decisions being made today?
No.
Perfect. Okay. You're off and running.
Yeah, good. So I want to share my screen with you. I'm going to do it a little bit wonky, but I'm just going to go ahead and just try to work through this. My setup in my office is a little bit different than you'd normally see, so I'm not going to be able to put on the display on the PowerPoint, but you can see the screen that or the sheet that I'm talking from, right? You can see the top sheet says Thurston County Board of County Commissioners presentation June 2nd. Can you just give me you can see that? Okay, so I'm just going to speak from that and we'll go from there. First of all, thank you very much for the opportunity to present to you. I'm getting a little bit more adept at these Zoom presentations. It's actually kind of nice to sit in my office and kind of have a bunch of paper surrounding me, and it looks very professional behind me. But please know that there's a swirl of activity that is occurring in this office every day that has to do with the ability of working with our communities and the necessary requirement of working with our communities and our businesses as we're all dealing with this COVID environment. We had a staff meeting this morning with our team, and we were talking a little bit about how things started out in February with a kind of a metered approach, and then starting in March, things just opened up, ground opened up, and we put into play really fast some mitigation efforts that we were doing to serve this business community. And that's really what I want to talk to you about, is a regional approach to how we're dealing with and addressing, and we're going to move forward with COVID, the environment. One of the themes that I want to leave you with is that economic development is not done in a vacuum. It's done in great partnerships with other organizations, with other agencies, and certainly the necessary requirement of public and private relationships. Economic development is not done by itself. It's not a Michael Cade activity. It's not an Economic Development Council sole activity, but it is an activity that's done with all of us. And really, that's the theme I want to leave you with. So what today we're going to talk to you about is the work that our regional task force, Regional Economic Recovery Task Force, has put together, and some of the concepts behind it. Please, please, please stop me when I go too far afield or you have questions. Otherwise, I'm just going to keep going, and we'll get to questions and answers at the end. And Jason, Mindy, Chris, and Jenica, please, if you see a point where I need to elaborate or you want to insert yourself, please do, because that's the way economic development needs to be done. One of the guiding principles of this work that we're doing is investment. And how do we create an investment that Thurston County businesses and communities can take advantage of and make sure that there's a recovery. And that's an interesting word when you think about recovery. Recovery is not starting tomorrow. Recovery started right away, and it started in February. And when you think about it, the things that we needed to do then, we started that platform building. But as we move forward, please keep in mind that recovery started yesterday, and we will continue to move forward as we relaunch and recalibrate and move our economy forward. We will get through this, and we will get through this together. And we will get through this with great aplomb, and we'll get through it with great professionalism and great partnership. These are our guiding principles of the task force. The task force is made up of representatives of the Pacific Mountain Workforce Development. We're not going anywhere without workforce. The Workforce Development Council has to be at the table, and they are. The Thurston County Chamber of Commerce, the Experience Olympia and Beyond, the Economic Development Council, the Community Foundation, the Port of Olympia, the county. Jenica has been a fantastic partner and a guide for this. City of Tumwater, City of Olympia, City of Lacey. And Jason Robertson is our most able guide and consultant as we move forward. He's our trusted advisor as we move forward with this. These are our guiding principles. Be wise, be strategic. Find ways to get people back to work. Use local dollars for challenges. Leverage and maximize federal, state, and private resources. Ensure benefits. Stimulate economic recovery. Invest in opportunities. And use this moment to expand future economic opportunity for all. And please keep that in mind when we're talking about recovery. It has to do with resiliency and the ability of a community to get to this point, and the next time when we're hit by a tsunami, that we go this way and we come right back. We don't spend a lot of time at zero, that we move forward. And those businesses have an ability to employ people, put families back to work, drive revenues, and provide a quality of life that we're so lucky and blessed to have in this community. Let's talk a little bit about the concept of strategic economic development. And this is really where the Community Foundation United Way come in. I've been referred to as a workhorse. I get my head down and I move forward. But when you start thinking about strategic economic development, you need organizations to work with each other. And so we need to define what economic development is. I already said that it takes a partnership. But when you start looking at what is a strategic economic development strategy or a strategic economic development plan, when you boil it down to its core mission and core activities, it's a series of strategic steps that, when aligned with broad community needs, provides a pathway for the entire community. This is not just about one sector, two sectors, or three sectors. We undertook through the Pacific Mountain Workforce Development Council a recent cluster analysis where sectors are. We know where those sectors are. We know where those supply chains are. Now we know where they're broken. And now we know where those impacts are downstream. We know where dollars are not flowing, and we know how families are impacted by that. So you really have to be strategic in taking those steps forward. It's that old saw that I remember when I came up with economic development back in 1991, my first boss said, "Michael, rising tide lifts all boats." Yeah, he's true. He's a smart man, and he's one of my mentors. If boats have holes, they won't rise with the tide. They'll go right down the bottom. So we need to keep that in mind. A rising tide lifts all boats, but only when all boats are seaworthy. So let's talk about what all those boats are. It's a continuous process of ensuring that resources are highly leveraged. $1 begets $2, $2 begets $4. It's a geometric mathematics that we need to look at. Not 1 plus 2, not 1 plus 3, not 1, but it's additive. And so we're always looking to add to the pie. And then economic development is grained as part of the overall strategies for partnership organizations. We're all moving together under the same concept and the same ideas about how do we improve communities.
Did he?
Hold on.
I
We'll get
haven't seen
there.
him in several months. He could have.
So strategic community resiliency, we need to ensure that critical human needs are addressed through actions. Human needs, I hate it when people ask me, I get asked all the time, what's the unemployment rate of Thurston County? And I'll tell people that. That doesn't tell the story. This is statistic, but when you boil it down, it's families, it's individuals with needs, it's individuals not being able to meet their obligations. It's individuals in need of healthcare. It's individuals with need of a wage. It's individuals' ability to take care of their families. So when we start talking about critical human needs, that's when we need to really think about what is the impact of economic development. We ensure families and individuals do not get left behind in economic recovery, but are part of the solution. They have to be part of that mix. They have to be part of that conversation. We stand shoulder to shoulder with partners, businesses, human social workers, support and build the capacity of the community and foundation, and United Way, making possible that rising tide lifts all boats. It's not just the economic development, but it's the boat of Thurston County. It's the one that we will move forward to in economic recovery. The conversations that we've had this last week have stretched my mind in ways that I'm blessed for, and hopefully that they will carry me through the rest of my career with the notion that we do work together. And I want you to really know that when we think about economic development, it is not a singular activity, but it is a myriad of steps that when we align, lead to community well. When we set up our recovery task force, I could be busy all day. We could be busy every day, 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day. But let's think about this in a very strategic fashion. Let's think about responding, and let's set up a mechanism where we respond to the current environment. You had an economy of about $12.9 billion was your GDP. Right now, you're at about 11.5. That's a lot of dollars that are no longer circulating in your economy and your community. So let's respond to it. Let's make sure that we have mechanisms and people in place to do the triage and to stop that bleeding. Just stop it, just shut it down. Let people move on and make sure they have plans. ThurstonStrong.org was set up. It's phenomenal. I have some website statistics to provide you. It's been a leader in the state, how communities actually respond to this. I have an opportunity to meet with my economic development councils around the state 3 times a week. Yikes. But one of the things that they do is ask me, how are you guys doing at Thurston Strong? Where are your partners? Why are you doing it? And it's not Cade. It is not Michael Cade. It is Thurston County's community moving this forward. We want to make sure that we're looking at employment security and make sure that job share is, we know what that mix is. We've set up a business hotline. Phenomenal numbers. The numbers have slowed, thankfully, down. And I'll share those numbers with you a little bit, but it's phenomenal when you start thinking about the number of calls that we received. My staffs that were open 9:30 to 3:30 every day. Nobody goes home until their plate is clean. My team works from 7 in the morning till 7 at night to make sure that every call gets returned. It's a voicemail and it's not an email or a text. We're talking about payment deferrals to make sure that folks have an understanding of where those payment deferrals are. We're working with businesses to develop strategies so they can make sure that their contracts and obligations are whole. And we're developing a job corps. The things highlighted in red are what I'm going to talk to you more specifically about today. We talk about reset, federal subsidies. Let's make sure that we're in alignment and ready to receive any federal subsidies. If we're not ensuring that we take advantage of those resources, we're not doing our jobs. One of the lessons that Jason and I talked about and came out of 2008, 2009, the EDC did great work. We all did great work. But I was not leverage my resources and my activities against the rest of the community. So let's make sure we're doing that. Business tech support. Things are changing. We have an idea that of the 40, I don't know how many, what our unemployment rate is just about under 15%. Of those people that are unemployed now, anywhere between 25 and 40% of those employees won't be employed back in those jobs that they left. So how do those businesses continue to operate? Let's find out what those technical assistance is that they need. Let's talk about retraining to make sure those individuals have every opportunity for employment. And student need funding. We're blessed to have 3 higher ed institutions that are absolutely ingrained in economic development. St. Martin's University, South Puget Sound Community College, and the Evergreen State College. We've done some economic impacts multipliers. I'll refer to those later or refer to you on your own, those economic impact studies. One of the things that we found when we studied those organizations is that if they are not operating, the business community is not taking advantage of it. taking advantage of those students and those ideas and those businesses that get launched out of those things. Childcare capacity, I will show a little my personal politic here. If we do not take care of childcare capacity today, we will have problems much longer than after the COVID is over. We cannot move forward without childcare. 50% of our population is childcare. They represent 100% of our future. And so we just need to figure it out.
Never heard that.
Relaunch, the notion that we're going to relaunch the community and the economy. One of the things that we learned very well out of the 2001 recession was let's do some diversification. 2008, 2009, we learned that lesson again. We're blessed to have a very diverse economy now. And we've talked ad nauseum about that shift of where those wages are earned. So let's continue building on our relaunch. Let's support businesses they relaunching with a PPE, purchase distribution program. Make it possible for them to relaunch and just restart. Scale up program, women in business program. Those are phenomenal programs. We do great work. Actually, the state is now asking us to take that statewide. We'll be doing 12 different cohorts that we're going to train folks throughout the state. That's based here at Thurston County. Every one of those businesses that have gone through that program, 295 businesses have gone through that program in the last 3 years, have shown profits, have shown increased value, and have shown increased employment opportunities. Stand-up grants. Let's make sure that businesses have every fiscal opportunity to move forward, and let's allow them to do that. An economic catalyst. Let's look at economic catalyst projects to make sure that we understand we have our heads up, look around. And that's hard for me to say because I just said, I'm a guy that sits at my desk and I'm a workhorse. Let's keep our heads up. Let's keep looking around for those economic catalyst projects. Every one of these projects in red has a return on investment to ensure that there's community resiliency. We know a dollar goes where it goes and where it is impacted and where it expands to. So Thurston Strong, I'm going to stop for just a second and I'm going to look to my partners, look at Jenica and Jason and Mindy and Chris. How are we doing so far? Am I making sense or I'm just throwing out word salad? Okay. So I'm going to just keep moving forward until you guys say, Cade, stop, let's talk. Thurston Strong. So how do we swirl around? We're all kind of moving. We're all kind of moving in different elements. So we created Thurston Strong. One point of entry for businesses and one point of entry for access to resources and one point of exit for dollars in resources and programs. I would encourage you to go to www.thurstonstrong.org. That website has over 4,000 users and is growing and followers. Actually, if you break out the metrics of where those users are from, all over Thurston County, not only in Olympia, not just in Tumwater or Lacey, all over the region. So that is a site that people are going to and they're clicking through, click to find out resources. We provide Chamber of Commerce is a great partner and they're connecting for workforce in business technical assistance. We're finding avenues for emergency fund distribution. We ran the Lacey grant through that program. We also ran the Working Washington Business Emergency Grant through that program. We advertised it. We had over 1,000 applications to those two grant programs that all went through that. We all identify where they're coming from. We track that data. Workforce and training connections. How do I get access to? How do I find out where are those connections for us? And then each one of the jurisdictions has also talked internally about what are the utility tax and other payment deferrals? What are those resources that people need to take advantage of and talk to their local jurisdictions about so we have a clearinghouse of information. So I want to talk a little bit about now the individual projects that are really will take the rest of our conversation is the first one is the Job Corps concept. You can see the flow chart there. And the idea behind the Job Corps concept is that we have a lot of folks that have been jettisoned or shed out of their jobs. And those are families, those are individuals. And so the idea is that, long story short, let's create a pool of funds that we can hire X amount of individuals for X amount of hours under 1099 contracts and put them to work. And where do they work? They work for nonprofits. They work for agencies that need that assistance. They work for organizations that need that lifting forward and reduce their overhead. Make sure that their critical delivery of services on the human services side of the equation have access to employees and individuals. Let's pay them. Let's make sure that those dollars are supportive of those businesses and nonprofits. The United Way, godsend, they do this work. Let's put our resources right in front of Chris and say, Chris, just put them to work and let's see what happens. We know that we will be successful on the human services side. You think about the delivery of services and product that individuals are required of, that they no longer have the ability to employ people. So let's do that. Let's make sure we do it. Let's don't take the place of employment, but let's take the place of unemployment. And let's move those forward, folks. So if you follow that flow chart back from the left to the right, you'll see the dislocated worker, and there's the Job Corps. Right now it says Thurston EC, but really the concept is United Way. You know, we work with nonprofits to find projects and opportunities, and then they do that work and either return to the original job or they're hired as a regular employee. Think back to this concept isn't new in the United States. Think back to the 1930s. What happened in that era with the Great Depression. This is mirrored exactly what those resources can do. I grew up under the concept that one of the greatest social programs that we have is an employment opportunity and the ability to take care of your family. This, I call it the wheel of goodness. Here's your wheel of how that is a cycle: local funding to private funding, federal funding, emergency paychecks, community benefit, spending at the local business, creates a multiplier of spending, tax revenue, and goes back to local funding. And so if we can set that wheel in motion, we know that we'll put a couple of thousand people to work over a couple of thousand hours between now and the calendar year, end of the calendar year. Workforce Development Council is a significant partner in this and identifying new resources for us and new funding. So let's start the process. Let's start the process of putting people back to work. Childcare capacity. Got to figure it out, folks. A couple of years ago, I was asked to start thinking about childcare, and I went, I had my 3 kids. They grew up. They moved out of the house. They're fine. But I know that if I was, my wife Sonia and I had our 3 kids now, and we were in this COVID environment, and I don't mean to get personal on this, but as my wife was laid off and I was employed, I don't know what we do. And she got called back to work. I don't know what we do with childcare. I really don't. I don't have an answer for you, but let's figure it out. Let's get smart about it. Let's put smart people to work. Let's figure it out. We've talked to the Childcare Action Council about identifying those resources. Let's figure it out. Let's put it right in front of Chris and Mindy and say, okay, here's the results. But there's got to be the notion of worker recruitment and retention. We have to make it viable for individuals to go into that system and become quality childcare. It is not a way station for individuals to come out of a school or a high school and go here and then go on to another career. That is a viable career, so let's figure it out. We have to figure out salary subsidies. We have to find out what those facility expansion, what are requirements of those facilities to expand. Right now, they can't. We've heard stories that if a childcare starts tomorrow at their full capacity that they're allowed to, they're actually going to lose money. So why start? So let's look at state regulatory advocacy. Let's be an advocate for the state regulatory environment. Let's do that. Let's band together as a community and say it is important. This is a priority of this community, and there's training capacities that we need to have. Make sure that people have every opportunity to become certified, become licensed. There are inhibitors out there. The YMCA, Kyle Kronk called me yesterday and said, hey, we are with you, and we want to make sure that you know what we're doing. So let's make sure that our partners understand what we're doing as well. But this is a critical element of our recovery. We talk about recovery. No childcare, no recovery. On the business relaunch strategy, so we've had 16,000 cases of businesses in the Center for Business Innovation. That's a lot of business cases. That's a lot of business cases. In a good year, I get about 5,000, just under 5,000. Had 16,000 in the last 2.5 months. So if you add up all the employment on that, that's a couple of thousand people. I mean, it's just So let's get those people the ability to relaunch. And it's everything from, we're a closely held business, we're a first, second, third generation business, and we're just going to close up shop. So let's figure out what that direct assistance is. Let's help them reopen. The Chamber of Commerce created a toolkit to restart. Phenomenal work. Man, that is a step-by-step guide. It's a best practices. Let's find out PPE sourcing and distribution. As we are in phase 2 and going into phase 3, just a course of being that we're going to have to deal with is how do we deal with a COVID environment? It's not going to go away. It might diminish, but it's not going to go away. And until we have that testing and vaccine, it's not going to go away. So let's deal with it and make sure that business has every resource to be safe, to ensure confidence in the customers and consumers and clients. Because if that consumer confidence and consumer client confidence is not there, we need to step backwards and figure that out. We need to instill that. Let's stand up grants for small business survivors. Thurston Strong 2.0 County and City Business Communications Network. Let's make sure that we are looking at Thurston Strong as not something that goes away. This is the way we're going to do business from now on. I'm fully committed, our organization is fully committed to ensuring that Thurston Strong doesn't conclude on September 30th of 2020. Not going to happen. We are going to continue that work. Expand business training and outreach. Right now, we cannot meet the demands of the technical assistance. I've got a wonderful staff, and I encourage you all to reach out to them, find out what they're doing, ask the question. But they're a phenomenal group of people that just continue to amaze me, not at their ability of the work that they're doing, but their ability to expand and find new ways of doing business. So we're going to do some other things, some other initiatives to make sure that we're building confidence in business assistance and business relaunch. One of the things I definitely want to talk about is recovery catalyst, replace lost jobs. As I talked a little bit earlier, there's a growing thought out there, a strategic academic thought about how many jobs are not coming back. What we saw out of the 2008, 2009 environment, a lot of those jobs didn't come back, but they went to work somewhere. And let's be strategic about it. Let's think about targeted recruitment and expansion investment. You know, it's interesting when I get on my statewide calls, all my EDC partners are, by golly, we got to make sure that we're thinking smarter, not harder. Let's look at the strategies and techniques that other people are using. The one thing that we have over and above everybody else is we have some great levelers here in Thurston County. And I'm not talking about let's be better, let's be score Thurston 1, everybody else 0. What I'm talking about is the community of Thurston County be the victor and be the winner on this thing. What we have is an idea of where our supply pipelines are. Let's find out where those gaps are. Let's recruit. Let's relaunch those businesses within that supply chain. Let's make sure that we're talking a local supply chain. And maybe if there is a large geographic dispersal supply chain, let's shrink it so we have the ability to continue to operate. We do need to continue the diversification and the relaunching of our ecosystem. We've created some maps so we know what our ecosystem looks like. Let's start filling it out for COVID, post-COVID environment, and that's what we're going to do there. That has a direct benefit to the county and the cities as we add new jobs and new multipliers and new expansion opportunities. So I do not want to underplay and understate the necessity of replacing lost jobs. And, you know, people, I think okay, let me get that out of there. Sorry about that. I think one of the things that we get lost in is the notion that a recruitment means to replace. No. This is augmentation. This is economic development 101. Let's build from within. Let's build what we have and expand and build to our resources and build to our strengths. This is, do you all see those pop-ups on your screen? Those blue pop-ups? Sorry about that. That's our hotline. That's our hotline activity. The chatter going back and forth. I'm sorry. I just realized it was popping up on your screen. Sorry about that. So there's another opportunity of excellence right there. But this is, this chart here will give you how we've distilled down what we think that investment needs to be. Task force support, childcare capacity, $500,000, micro business stand-up grants, $2 million, Job Corps, $2 million, PPE bulk purchases, distribution. Other communities are doing it. This is a wonderful idea. This is something we get right in front of our businesses tomorrow. Recruitment expansion projects, $400,000. Emergency response reserve, $500,000. So we think a total funding package of $6 million. And so really the idea is where those funds come from and where we're going to do. I want you to make sure that you go back to my earlier statement. We've done a return on an investment, so we know where these dollars will end up. We have a pretty good idea of what that multiplier will be and what the impact upon this community. It's jobs, it's job creation, it's multipliers back to the city and county revenues. But most importantly, it's the impact on families and family wages. We know where those dollars go. I'm very confident in our history of work at the Economic Development Council. We know that every dollar you put into this organization, we generate about $15 to $20 in the local economy. That's just our history and that's our nature. That's the DNA gene pool that I swim in. So we know that there's a return on investment. Let's put us back to work. Give us those resources. I'd love nothing more than say, Chris, take the Job Corps. Chris, help us figure out the childcare capacity strategy. Mindy, help us leverage new dollars and resources. Let's figure it out. We have the partners at the table. We have the resources within our minds. We have the strategy and the map, and we're going to move forward. So I go back to the saw that rising tide lifts all boats. Only if those boats are solvent, because otherwise they're going to go straight down the bottom. We're going to be right back to where we started. So I know that was a lot. I'm sorry, I kind of talked kind of fast. I get kind of excited about this kind of stuff. I love it. I hate it that we're in this environment, but we're looking forward to the challenge ahead. So I'm going to stop. I'm going to look to my partners, Chris, Mindy, and Jason. Parts that I missed, parts that we need to kind of buttress before we get into Q&A and discussion.
Yeah, Chris, do you have something? Go ahead.
No, actually, I have to do this by phone, so I have to keep swiping on my screen to find who's talking. It's really clunky. I'm sorry.
I'm John Hutchings. Go ahead, Chris.
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, I think before we go into any other discussion, are there questions about Michael's presentation? I think if there's any more fleshing out that needs to be done there, I can certainly talk about, the health and human services issues that we are anticipating and where we're prepared to continue focusing our attention over the next year. But one of the things I think is really important, as you all know, between Community Foundation and United Way, we have really been prioritizing a couple of things. One has been continuing to ensure that essential programs do not collapse under the strain of the pandemic. Our feeding programs have seen demand go through the roof. Their expenses have gone through the roof. More and more households are relying on those basic needs programs, and we've needed to keep them really fully reinforced, right? And then also with this very, very high unemployment, ensuring that individuals and families are able to continue paying their rent, paying their utilities, and having their basic needs be met. However, one of the reasons I think, and I don't want to speak for Mindy, she can speak for herself, but one of the reasons that we both felt it was important to show support for this proposal was that, these are three foundational elements of recovery. Small business recovery and economic recovery only improve the recovery of nonprofits and the individuals and families who've been so deeply impacted by the virus. So there's no daylight between a really robust economic development and small business recovery plan and the work that we're doing on the human services side in shoring up nonprofits and individuals, right? So I like how eloquently Michael has presented that to you today. We have to be in a position not only to work in partnership with Thurston Strong on an initiative like this Job Corps program where we can redeploy displaced workers in support of their communities through nonprofit work for a brief period of time, right? But also to be able to keep our eyes focused on the horizon all the time for needs that we might not have anticipated that may continue to emerge over time. So these three things are fundamental. These three things are the foundation of our community's recovery: economic development, small business supports, continuing to resource and support essential programs, and continuing to provide supports to individuals and families who will experience these impacts due to long-term unemployment over the next year. Is there anything I should add to that, Mindy, Michael?
Go ahead, Mindy.
Hi, Mindy Ruley. As Chris said, we're not, we did not prepare a second presentation specifically about basic needs, because we wanted to come here today and show support for Thurston Strong's request and acknowledge that, as Michael said, recovery is going to take a collective effort, and it's an entire continuum from basic needs to some higher level economic development strategies. I think I do want you to know that, philanthropy, the requests that Thurston County is, we're getting philanthropy is, the requests far exceed philanthropy's ability. And so all of those needs aren't built into this request here. And we want you to understand that and be aware of it, but we're not bringing forward a separate request today because we want to show support and collaboration for Thurston Strong in this effort.
Yes.
Okay. Gary and Ty, do you have anything to add, or any questions or comments rather?
Well, if I had a question, it would be, your proposal, is 25%. Was that off the top or after we paid our catch-up bills? What are you proposing, Mike?
So I understand off the top or pay your catch-up bills. Let's define what your catch-up bills are.
Well, I think.
Yeah, that's what Romero started off with, the 2.8 million reimbursement, and then setting aside $1 million for economic development and social services, and the public health emergency, 6.5 million. And as Chris just said, anything that might pop up that we can't even imagine just yet. We don't know.
Well, I don't know if I can answer that question for you, Commissioner, but Jason,
Yeah. So just a kind of big picture thing, commissioners, this proposal is task force driven. That's all right now. The core team is the Major Cities Workforce Development Council. Everybody Michael mentioned at the beginning. And what we thought is the $6 million could be primarily raised through 25% of each jurisdiction CARES Act money. And the reason that it's a good fit for us is that CDBG isn't as good a fit. The CDBG is better used dealing with some health and social issues, but economic recovery is easier to address through the CARES money. So we're before you first, but we'll be going to Olympia, Lacey, Tumwater with the same request so that we can build a pool of funds and have one administrator for each of the programs instead of launching them independently in each community, if that makes sense.
It does, and I want to get to Ty and my comments too, but I didn't call on you, Jenica. Did you have anything to add?
No, not at this time. I think Michael did a great job putting forward discussions that have been happening at the Thurston Strong group.
Yeah, just.
Okay. Commissioner Menser, you have anything?
No, I will, but I'll defer to whoever's next in line. I don't have anything burning.
I will just add that great presentation, good information. I really like the float the boat, only if it doesn't have holes in it. That makes sense. I love that analogy. That makes sense. And I really like what you're doing. You being the collective you, Michael, Chris, and the other organizations, Mindy, of course, because you're looking at it from not what's right in front of me and not what happened yesterday, but as Michael said, recovery started back in January, February, but you're looking at the holistic picture years down the road as well. And you're looking at it from a regional perspective. Now, regional to me means two things. Regional means area, geographical area or region, but also when I'm thinking of a regional approach, it needs to be, in my head, it needs to be equitably applied with equitable results and benefits. And so I'll be looking at that with a critical eye, with where the the input has to be commensurate with the output of the game. And I'm not talking about me personally, I'm talking about the business community, Thurston County in its entirety and such. So that's what I'm looking at. And again, I like that that outer space view of what's going on and taking everything into consideration, and the collaboration with all these organizations and entities is huge. But it's got to be done, in my opinion, equitably across the board.
I think if you don't mind, if I just might interject a comment there,
Please.
Commissioner. Chris just said something really astute. Something that I think economic development practitioners need to start pushing out around the state. If she's not successful, the EDCs might as well just go home. You know, if she's not successful, and if Mindy's not successful, economic development, he's just what are we here for? If we're not successful, she's not going to be successful. And there's an intimate link between the notion of community and economic development. I personally bristle at sometimes the notion of a local effort. I've never been known as a localist, but in this case, we need to define local as being regional. And the region is that we need to understand is that it does spill out across the geopolitical boundaries of our South Puget Sound market. We have companies here that extend out into the world. Manufacturers here don't manufacture for local products, but if they don't have the support services on the human needs side, they don't want to operate. They don't want to operate here. So let's talk about relaunch, and let's talk about making sure that's that resiliency piece. The EDC and the United Way and Community Foundation and all the organizations, Thurston Strong, we're kindred spirits, and we need to recognize it. The more we kind of strip away that bark of personal politics, then better off we'll be. So thank you for your comments about regional notion, because that's the notion here.
Okay, go ahead, Ty.
So back when we first heard from both of your groups, it was separate, and United Way came in and asked for, I can't remember, 70, or I think you asked for 150 and we gave you 75,000, something like that.
Yeah.
EDC had a request and we tried to meet some part of that. And so we've got this, what seems like now a pretty finite pot of money. What I'm hearing you say is that the United Way is here to support a pretty broad request from Thurston Strong. And does that mean that we're not going to be asked for some other chunk of that same limited pot of money specifically for the programs that the United Way had presented back a month or so ago? I'm just trying to get a feel for what I'm hearing.
Yes. So no, it does not mean that. We are going to, we are continuing to approach multiple funders to continue to fund the nonprofit and human services response over the long term. But for this particular meeting, we didn't want to have two complete and isolated separate requests before the commissioners, because we truly understand that, as Michael was saying, their success is our success and our success is theirs, right? We really see these three elements, the economic development, small business support, the nonprofit support, and the basic needs supports as being irretrievably bound together, right? And so we didn't want to submit competing proposals. What we want you to understand is that, we have been working in the last 2.5 months to get lines of sight into every resource in the community. So when we have been doing our COVID-19 funding, we are talking to the people at the county to find out where the Commerce Grants funds landed, where the HHSC funds landed. We are looking to see how the CDBG funds are allocated. We at United Way are in the process of administering federal emergency food and shelter fund program dollars and allocating those for those basic needs, and then trying to find where the gaps are and where the gaping needs are in basic needs. And that has been around, our shelters, our food programs, food banks, congregate meal programs, senior services, and then individual and family financial supports to keep the strain of this from collapsing the whole system. So no, this this doesn't mean that you're not going to hear from us, because these other two elements that we're working on now are going to remain critical priority over the next 12 months. But we also know that we can continue resourcing just these things. And if we do not get on board and support a comprehensive economic recovery plan, then we'll be positioning ourselves to fund basic emergency needs for 10 times longer, if that makes sense.
Ty, if the presentation is reversed, I would be sitting in that corner, have the same message that Chris just gave you.
Okay, fair enough. Well, in terms of a comment, I first just want to thank all of you, honestly. I mean, it's been economic development strategy was right when this crisis broke, was something that really stressed me out, because we do have the different cities that are important in Thurston County, and the way it all came together, and the way I feel like everyone has worked collaboratively in all the ways Michael described has just been, gives me a lot of confidence in that what we're doing, that resources put in your hands are going to be going, so to speak, are going to be deployed in a way that's very, very well thought out and balanced across the community and hitting the right spots. So I have great confidence in the approach, and the strategies that you've laid out seem really well thought out. So I'd certainly like to get as much, many resources in your hands as you can. That said, I'm sort of conservative about wanting to see the full picture of what is it going to be that, that we're going to need to be using this very limited. We don't know. There may be more money coming from the federal government. That's possible, but we're not counting on that at all. So thank you for all this information. It's certainly well thought out and will be a high priority on my list as we go through this. And I think Ramiro's we've got, as he pointed out, we've got requests, we've got asks to our various departments and offices that we need to look at, because I have no idea exactly what the scale of those requests might be, but hopefully we can get resources to you.
And I'm glad you spelled that out, Chris, that you'll be coming back. I understand that and I appreciate that, because basic needs is vital. And just so you know, when you walk away or when we leave, you'll know where I'm coming from. Childcare is massively important. Micro business stand-up, massively important. But what I don't want to be lost in the discussion is the county is responsible for the public health and social services aspect for the entire county. The cities don't do that, the county does. And it's going to cost a ton of money. So when I see things, for example, like the bulk purchasing and distribution of PPE, I need a lot more information than that, because it's hard for me to swallow that. And like Ty said, we don't know if we're going to get more money, when it's going to come in, where it's going to come from, how much it's going to be, and what restrictions there may be put on that. So these are things I've got to really weigh, as well as what the county needs are, when the other departments weigh in as well. Commissioner Edwards, before we wrap it up, and then I'll get to Ramiro. Anything?
I guess we've got a couple communications here, one from the chamber and one from Michael Cade, kind of laying some of this out. We have past experiences that we can look at. When Michael Cade talks about a $20 return on a dollar investment, that makes sense. We put a lot of money into Coyote Village some time back, and I don't know of any success stories that was supposed to be transitional housing, and it ended up just people camped out there, and they're still there. No success necessarily. So I think we want to be careful as we move forward. Commissioner Hutchings, you mentioned that it's our sole responsibility to cover public health. So I don't know where we can start taking that money off. I don't see it coming off the top, but I want to be very, very supportive of the EDC and their goal here as they put this program together. But I think we really need to enhance revenue and enhance the revenue stream by removing regulatory roadblocks more than even the chamber has presented to us. I think there's a lot more that we can do. So we've got some comparisons of throwing money away or investing money is the way I look at this. And we have to be smart at how we invest this money. And if I can get 20 back on every dollar I invest, that's where I'm going. So
Yeah.
I want to push forward with this, but I want to be realistic. I know that the governor's office and Commerce, they held over $200 million or something back for what we don't know yet. But if there's ever going to be a good example of the community coming together and coming up with solutions to address a problem, I think what we're doing here and talking about here today is a prime example, and that we ought to be in touch with Commerce or the governor's office, whoever has that money on hold for whatever reason they have it on, and see if we can't end up with a larger portion to divvy out for the type of return that Mr. Cade is talking about. So I know we're short of time.
Yeah.
That's kind of where I'm at on this.
Go ahead, Ramel, wrap it up for me, please.
Yeah, and related to Commissioner Edwards' comments, the Washington State Association of Counties is working with OFM to see when and why, or when the additional $240 million will be distributed to counties. Because that was the initial intent, I believe, of the CARES money to have over $540 million to be distributed across all jurisdictions under 500,000 population. We only got a distribution of 300 million, and that's how we got the 15.7. So there is another effort that we need to work across the state related to that additional distribution. So from my point of view, Michael, Chris, Mindy, Jason, thank you very much. This is a great presentation, a lot of thought behind this. I believe the decisions coming up and the distribution of the money are going to be critical and difficult, because as the commissioners stated, the needs are in front of the county in so many different ways. I have already organized a briefing with the board, I believe for June 12th. That will be the next Friday, a week from this Friday, and where we can probably bring all the requests, including this request, in front of the board, and see, hopefully at the end of that exercise, we'll see how the money can be, will be distributed.
Could I add one more thing? I mean, I'd like to know what the other jurisdictions are doing at some point along there as this group approaches them.
The cities,
Yes,
I believe they're gonna be reaching out with the same
They haven't done
request.
yet.
yes, I heard that, but I'd like to have a response back about what their intentions are as well.
Yeah, we'll get that by the 12th, hopefully.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you all very much. I have a 2 o'clock I need to get to. And so thank you so much for participating and the information.
Thank you. Thank you for your time and your attention. I appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.